Hello everyone, I'm Brior, and welcome back. If Goodgame Studios released a classic version of Empire, would you play it? Only you can answer that question, and I hope you'll do so in the comments down below. Today though, I'll talk about why I think Goodgame Studios should release Empire Classic, what that means, and why they almost certainly will not. First, believe me, I'm aware. This video is the epitome of talking to a brick wall. Goodgame Studios has never provided any indication that Empire Classic is even on the table. They're not likely to listen to my suggestions about the current state of the game, let alone some other version of the game that they should bring back. But we can talk about it for the sake of entertainment, and for there to be any chance Classic Empire could happen in the future, well, the conversation has to get started somewhere. We all know that Goodgame Empire is an online, periodically updated castle building and military strategy game. But if you're a veteran of the game, or if you've watched my complete history of Goodgame Empire video series, you'll know that the game has changed drastically from what it was. The original version of Empire was quite simple. There were only a handful of buildings, resources, and unit types. Players focused mostly on the quest book and PvP. Even though there were fewer buildings, like I just said, actually planning and building one's castle somehow had a greater emphasis in the game than it does now. Over time, Goodgame Studios also added the game's major events. One of the great upsides of early Empire was that things weren't complicated unless you made them complicated, such as by coordinating with your alliance mates in war. Because the game was simpler, it was also far easier to keep balanced. Monetization was much less pervasive and also considerably more straightforward. Players bought rubies and then spent those rubies on a discrete number of advantages in the game. Today, there is often a better value to spending money on randomized rewards through features like the Wheel of Unimaginable Affluence and mystery boxes. One might say that the earlier versions of Goodgame Empire were, in fact, simply better than what we have now. Unfortunately, that has essentially become the thesis of my channel, something I take no enjoyment in, for the record. Regardless of whether you agree that things were better, it's beyond dispute that the game was different, and that's the point. A phenomenon that happens with games like Empire is that, after the passage of time, players come to realize that the game which first captured their interest is somehow just gone. When I log in to play Goodgame Empire, something I no longer do frequently, it feels as though I am playing an entirely different game that has borrowed Empire's artwork. And where a sufficient number of veteran players like myself exist, even if a game developer denies it, there can often be a strong demand for the re-release of a classic version. Cue the clip that I'm sure many of you are familiar with from BlizzCon.
Have you ever thought about adding servers for previous expansions as they were then?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
Blizzard Entertainment did, in fact, go on to release a classic version of World of Warcraft in 2019 that was critically and commercially acclaimed. Another example of a successful classic release would be Old School RuneScape. The current player count of Old School RuneScape exceeds the player count of RuneScape 3. So, why can't we also have a classic version of Goodgame Empire? That's not a rhetorical question, by the way. I can think of several legitimate reasons. The most obvious is that, even at its peak, Empire was nowhere near as popular as those other games I mentioned. So, there is a correspondingly smaller universe of lapsed players likely to have much interest. One of the reasons to make this video, then, is to gauge how many of those players exist. So, allow me to once again encourage you to comment, or perhaps just to like the video. Another argument one might make is that, if we take World of Warcraft for example, even though that game has also been updated continually over time, there was a clearly defined original version that was feature complete and fully playable. Now, as it so happened, classic World of Warcraft didn't recreate version 1.0. I think it instead recreated version 1.12 or something like that. And I seem to recall there was a debate in that community about what version to go with. But in the context of Empire, it's not even clear where we would start. Empire's beta was released in 2011. At some point, the beta label was taken off. But if Goodgame Studios were to go back that far, or even to 2012, Empire Classic wouldn't include fundamental features like the quote-unquote new kingdoms, equipment, or hardly any of the game's core events. The biggest question, then, that Goodgame Studios would have to answer before even attempting Empire Classic would be what version of Empire is most worth going back to. Perhaps I can be of some help here. When I made the documentary videos last year, I spent a considerable amount of time looking at different eras in the game's history. Perhaps Goodgame Studios could go back to 2014 or 2015. That's probably what I would advocate. That era of Empire already had things like the Nomad Invasion, the Foreign Invasion, capitals and metropolises, the Storm Islands, and even the Hall of Legends. But if we move the needle just a little bit later, to 2016 or 2017, we could add in build items, royal quest lines, alliance cities, the battle for the royal capital, and far more LTPE events and equipment sets. Any later than that, and we run into relic equipment, which, despite having been in the game for 6 years, to me feels new. We would also encounter the Outer Realms, the first event to happen on its own temporary server and bring together all players from around the world. Other features introduced around that time, including the Wheel of Unimaginable Affluence, dramatically changed the game's monetization in a way that I felt brought about the end of Empire's classic heyday. But some of you might feel differently, particularly if that is around when you first began playing. You might well say that the big change wasn't until Mead was introduced in 2020. Perhaps it's wrong to approach this question by talking about what features the game had, as if we're trying to identify what version of Empire was objectively best. To be successful, Empire Classic would need to capture the most interest, which really means recreating the game when it was most popular, since that is what people are most likely to be nostalgic about. At the risk of repeating myself, this is all meant to be a discussion, so you can comment your thoughts below. But let me throw in yet another twist. Throughout Empire's history, players have always expected that the game would continue to receive updates. So, perhaps if we pick only a single static point in time, we risk failing to capture one of Empire's core elements, continual progression. Updates have also historically been important because, typically, whichever event was updated last will give the best rewards. I can't remember the last time, if ever, Goodgame Studios was so on top of things that every feature in the game was worth participating in. And without updates, what would you do next in Empire Classic after hitting level 70 and collecting the best equipment? Perhaps, if it was well balanced enough, the answer is PvP. But let's say Goodgame Studios released Empire Classic and committed to rerunning the game's updates. Would that recreate exactly the same experience we veteran players remember? Well, probably not, since players would approach the game differently with the knowledge of what new features would be coming when. Players might not buy the Executioner commander set, for example, knowing that the Highlander and Elementalist were not far away. Another point, there are certain strategies in Empire that we take for granted now, but which at some point had either not been discovered or were not common knowledge. Tool burning, snipe attacks, not building dwellings or wood and stone production buildings. In a certain sense, Empire Classic has already been solved. That phenomenon, where there really wasn't much to discover, occurred as well in classic World of Warcraft, where players found that practically every item or quest had already been fully documented, usually outside of the game on some forum or YouTube channel. Finally, and not to get too depressing here, but Goodgame Empire has always been a social game. Who you played with could make a big difference to your experience, and there's nothing Goodgame Studios can do to bring everybody back. Let's go even further out on a limb and say that Goodgame Studios both released Empire Classic and committed to developing new content, taking the game down a different path than the one we've seen in recent years. I know, at this point we've truly crossed into the absurd. But again, this is exactly what has happened with other classic titles. To stick with World of Warcraft as our example, players enjoyed new, old-school content in the form of the Season of Discovery updates. Let me ask you this, though. Would you trust the current iteration of Goodgame Studios to develop such a game, or to release Empire Classic at all? Okay, well, that question might be rhetorical. I don't think I could justify becoming invested in Empire Classic with the knowledge that such egregious pay-to-win features were coming, either in the form of what we're already familiar with or otherwise. Here's another reason why Goodgame Studios might not be interested. Wouldn't Empire Classic compete with and detract from the modern version of the game? If the old version of Empire was truly better, as I've suggested, why wouldn't everyone just play that? Well, it's worth remembering that Goodgame Studios released a game called Legends of Honor in 2016. I have a video about it here on the channel. That project failed, but what was remarkable about it is that it was incredibly similar to Empire, maybe just slightly more serious in tone and artwork. My conclusion, then, is that Goodgame Studios hasn't previously shown much of a concern about competing with itself. I think they'd be happy to have a successor to Goodgame Empire. We know, however, that the player count of Goodgame Empire has declined, and I think at some point, trying to recapture the original success of Empire, which could best be done through something like Empire Classic, has to become Goodgame Studios' best option. Another thing we should probably think about is how the market for free-to-play online browser games has changed. Think about how they're marketed, for example. When Empire first came out, I think a lot of people were playing Flash games on sites like Miniclip. That might be how I first discovered Empire. And I think many games today have a far faster pace, or are simply more immersive. The success of other classic titles, though, illustrates that a good game, no pun intended, can be timeless. However, Empire's classic success could never be guaranteed. Let's talk then about changes Goodgame Studios could make to improve Empire Classic, and to make its success more likely. Now, for reasons of simplicity and purism, not to mention skepticism about the current developers, some of you might say that there should be no changes. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but consider that, historically, Empire has always suffered from bugs, exploits, a lack of convenience features, and broken and unbalanced events. Do we really expect that Goodgame Studios would bring back the old version of the payment shop, complete with the VPN exploit? What about things like botting, something that Empire has always suffered from? Might there be an opportunity for Goodgame Studios to not just resurrect Empire Classic, but also ensure fair play? Historically, Goodgame Studios has taken two approaches to the botting issue. The first has obviously been to enforce the game's policies by detecting bots and banning players who are using them. But I would argue that Goodgame Studios has been marginally more successful in taking the opposite approach of adding convenience features to the game to ensure that everybody can benefit from some level of automation. We're talking mostly about the attack presets here, but much more recently, Goodgame Studios debuted an advisor feature for the events that is really just an above-board bot. I know it's clever of Goodgame Studios to find ways to monetize the issue of fair play, but if the Empire Classic we envision is to be set in 2014, might we want Goodgame Studios to add attack presets, either as a matter of convenience or fairness? What about the modern attack screen? Probably not necessary without the full range of troops and tools that are present in modern Empire, but it's something to consider. There are plenty of other convenience features that the earliest version of Empire would not have as well, like the ability to easily forward or delete battle reports. It can sometimes be difficult to draw the line between what is merely a convenience feature and what actually affects gameplay. How many of you remember when, back in the day, you would earn a decoration and, maybe even upon logging in, would have to select what castle it would go to? This was before the global decoration inventory, so you couldn't move decorations between castles after your choice was made. Rather, the decoration would be stuck there forever. This could be inconvenient if, for aesthetic purposes, you wanted all of a certain type of decoration to be in the same castle, but had difficulty remembering which one. And, in all likelihood, You'd probably want to funnel your best decorations to go to your main castle or to your food outposts, but then you wouldn't be able to move them to lower priority locations when it came time for them to be replaced. There's no question that the global decoration inventory affected gameplay, but I don't think I'd want to go back to a version of Empire without it. I also mentioned broken events. Let's say Empire Classic was set in 2016. Would we want Goodgame Studios to actually create a functional version of the Battle for the Royal Capital? Or can events sometimes be broken in a way that makes them more fun to play? Perhaps whether something is fun is really all that we care about. Let's talk about another technical issue, one that could actually be the biggest reason we're unlikely to see Empire Classic. Goodgame Empire was a Flash game. In 2019, Flash was being discontinued across the internet, and Goodgame Empire was recoded in HTML5. I'm not a computer programmer, but I doubt this was a simple undertaking. And for Empire Classic to be playable in a standard browser, a similar conversion would need to take place. It might actually be harder now, since I assume fewer developers remain well-versed in Flash. And this is all assuming that Goodgame Studios even has the original code, something that's likely, but perhaps not guaranteed. Now, at this point, the video is probably starting to sound like a list of reasons why Goodgame Studios should not release Empire Classic. But remember, I think they should. The great number of questions Goodgame Studios would have to answer before doing so is a testament to how many opportunities Empire Classic represents. And we have to be realistic about the barriers Goodgame Studios would face, technical or otherwise. But in so doing, we shouldn't lose sight of the basic point, which is that Goodgame Empire, old school Goodgame Empire in particular, was special and is worth bringing back. This is likely a video topic for another time, but I haven't found a complete replacement for Empire. If I had, well, I'd probably be uploading videos about it. Empire was a unique combination of city planning, castle building, economy management, military strategy, and massively multiplayer, always online gameplay. To be fair, I haven't really checked out what would likely be considered Empire's direct competitors, games like Clash of Clans. My impression has always been that most of what ruined Empire, monetization in particular, has been an industry-wide problem. Let me know if I'm mistaken. The other games I mentioned earlier, RuneScape and World of Warcraft, are perhaps similar to Empire in their own right. And of course, there are 4-time strategy games like Civilization, and city-building games like Banished and Manor Lords, the latter of which is particularly interesting for how it blends economy management and military operations in a medieval setting. Let me know if you'd watch a video about it. But when I think of the core of Empire's peak gameplay, coordinating mass attacks in a 65-man alliance, and staying up until 2 a.m. to catch your opponent sleeping, there isn't much that comes to mind. I'll keep exploring, but in the meantime, why not just bring that back, stripped of modern Empire's needless bloat and complexity, not to mention its extreme monetization. Just one more thing to say before I wrap up today's video, and that is that today, October 11th, 2025, marks the 10th anniversary of my channel. Technically, my YouTube account itself dates back to 2013, but I didn't start making videos for a few years. Making videos about Empire added an entirely new, and, as it turns out, much more persistent layer to my enjoyment of the game. I do take some pride in being one of the only Empire players to have made money off of the game. I think it's reasonably clear from the fact that I've stuck with Empire that I'm not really pursuing a ton of views, let alone ad revenue. But nor do I think I would still be doing this but for the 10,000 or so subscribers I currently have, and their generally very supportive comments. So, whether you started watching my videos yesterday or 10 years ago, thanks for helping to make this possible. And with that, I've been Brior, and I'll see you next time.